Welcome into the downtown studios of KMOX for the St. Louis City Soccer Report with Jennifer Cease and Nate Gatter coming to you together from in studio. It's been a minute, Nate, since we've been together in studio.
Do you remember off the top of your head when the last time was? Let's see, it wasn't last week.
No, because I was in here alone.
And it wasn't the week before because that was the playoff game.
Because you were in the stadium.
And it wasn't the week before because we were both outside the stadium together.
That's right.
So it would have been sometime mid-October.
That's right.
The last time we were in here together.
And, just a week ago, St. Louis City fell 2-1 to Sporting Kansas City, ending their historic season, really an incredible season. Just looking at some of the post-game notes that City sent out after that game, they finished the regular season 17-12-5 with the team's 56 points, good for the second most by an expansion team in the MLS history. Their 17 wins set the record for the most wins by an expansion team. First expansion team to win their conference in their inaugural season. They also joined the Atlanta United, Los Angeles FC, and Chicago Fire as the only expansion teams to score 60 or more goals in the debut season. And 16 different players got on the score sheet for City SC in MLS play, tying the team with Charlotte FC 2022 for the most different goal scorers for an expansion team in MLS history. And we found out just this week, goalkeeper Roman Berkey, goalkeeper of the year for the MLS.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot to be excited about. We're going to talk to Dale Schilly next. We'll talk to Tom Timmerman later on this hour, as well as Bill McDermott. I think kind of doing this first hour as a requiem for the 2023 St. Louis City team. A very complicated legacy, I think, that they will leave. On the one hand, the inaugural group, they brought the sport here on at the top flight level for the first time ever. They did so much to ensure that was a success and to get the club not just off the ground but soaring. And nothing that happens otherwise takes away from that. At the same time, I don't think any of it takes away from the disappointment of the way they fizzled down the stretch with 4 straight losses, including 2 in a row, including a really embarrassing one, I think, in their first playoff game and their only home playoff game to their rivals. I thought that was really an unfortunate way to end, and they probably deserved better in the sense that the narrative they had created deserved a better ending. I don't think they deserved a better result based on how they played. Maybe deserved a little bit better from game 2. Certainly they didn't from game 1. And I think parsing through all of that is just, it leaves a complicated legacy because there is a lot of bitter and there's also a lot of sweet, and neither one does anything, in my opinion, to diminish the other, if that makes sense.
You can be both. This is one of those things where it's not, they're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to be one or the other. You can, those guys had a press conference we had a few days later. We had the weekend. I think it was on Wednesday. Yeah, it was on Wednesday last week. And it was long. We had a 3-hour press conference where both Lutz and Bradley came in, and then they kind of filtered in players. I think we got like 8 of them. Yeah, or something like that.
Meanwhile, the Cardinals still haven't had a postseason press conference.
Somebody had commented that on Twitter. When are you guys going to have postseason? And, I thought you could not only hear it in their words, you could hear it in their tone and their mood and see it in their posture and their body language that, of course, right? Of course, we're proud of the season. Of course, we want to have a good team here. But, that's not too many days after they lost. They're still, frankly, pretty hacked off, not happy with themselves, not happy. They're going to take breaks now, right, with family. They're going to get together with that, but they would certainly rather be doing that on a positive note. And none of them felt positive. Grateful, but not positive.
I think grateful, but not positive is exactly, I hadn't heard it described that way. I think that's the exact right words for how I feel and how I think fans probably should feel, which is grateful. And maybe there's still some positivity. Obviously,
oh my gosh.
Even if they had
look
finished
at all
last,
the records.
even if they had finished last, we'd be grateful to have a team, right? So there would be some gratitude no matter what. But I think based on how poorly the season ended, I think grateful but not positive is the exact right way to put it. That I feel from overwhelming gratitude for how the season went, for all the effort that was required by so many people to make this a possibility. And yet I do feel a great deal of frustration and disappointment at not just that they lost, because all but one team will end the season with a loss.
Sure.
That they played so poorly and got so far away from their game and their identity in those final few games, even in the end of the regular season. Just not I don't think they covered themselves in glory, certainly, and I don't think they went out on their terms.
No, and several of them talked about, Leuven comes to mind, and all of them I always appreciate the fact that they don't really, pull any punches when it comes to saying how it really was. They're not afraid to talk about it. I asked Jared Stroud, was that meaningful for you, when Coach Bradley Carnell and him were at New York Red Bulls? He had told me a story where Bradley had stepped up to be interim head coach 5 days before playoffs, got, kind of pushed back because they got a head coach, and it was the first time Jared Stroud hadn't started. So I asked him if that was meaningful, and he said, "Of course it was meaningful, but I'd rather win. Like, I'd rather have not started and won." Leuven talked about the fact that he felt like he wasn't playing his best. He knows he wasn't. He talked about his mindset quite a bit, actually, that mentally he wasn't in it, that he's got lessons to learn for the next year. And of course, all of them talk that way, especially the veterans who know better, and then the newer players who are like, "Yeah, that was an eye opener."
Yeah, certainly. I think that's about right, and you can appreciate that they wanted to be honest in that
Yeah, I
moment.
do. I appreciate that. They usually are.
We got to get to a break because Dale Schilly is standing by. We'll have Tom Timmerman and Bill McDermott coming up as this first hour rolls on, looking back on the 2023 St. Louis City inaugural season. This is the St. Louis City Soccer Report, just getting going on KMOX.
Is your car still under warranty?
No, not anymore.
My mechanic just suggested an extended service plan from Ox Car Care.
Ox Car Care?
Yeah, Ox will cover repair bills if anything happens to the car. New brakes, transmission, AC, or engine problems. Plus, Ox Car Care offers free oil changes.
Nine.
The Y98 St. Louis City Soccer Report continues on America's Sports Voice, KMOX.
Nate Gatter, Jennifer Cease back with you for more St. Louis City Soccer Report here on KMOX with you all the way until 2 o'clock this afternoon. A big sports day on KMOX. Tom Ackerman just finished up Sports on a Sunday Morning this morning from 10 to noon if you were tuned in. And then, of course, even though it's the Chiefs bye week, we've got live sports coming up later today. St. Louis and Missouri battling in women's basketball. Tom Ackerman will have the call at 3 o'clock from Chaifetz Arena in Midtown after the Billiken men got a win last night here on KMOX over Illinois State. All of that and this show always available on the free Odyssey app. If you miss anything, including any of our many, many interviews with Dale Schilly, you can go back and hear that on the free Odyssey app, AUDACY, wherever you download your apps. Dale is with us now. Dale, we're sort of looking back and trying to sum up this 2023 St. Louis City season in 1 hour, which is obviously a difficult thing to do, especially because of how complicated the memories of this season will be. So much positivity on and off the field that ultimately ended on a sour note. When you look back, you've had very little processing time at this point, but when you look back, what do you think you'll remember?
Well, I think I'll just remember the fact that we got it off the ground, that the city help promote an awesome experience for fans and for just soccer people in the community. It's something that so many waited for so long to experience, and the experience itself was great. And I would say, now that we're removed a week from the loss up in Kansas City and losing out in the playoffs, I think when you look back, you have to say it was an overwhelming success, the season itself. And obviously we want to do more and progress further and everything else. But, when you just look at the first year and the experience and what it was like and the impact that the club had on the fans and on the soccer community and the city, I think it was a highly successful year.
Dale, you're a coach. What does it look like after Lutzen and Bradley were in and they talked, very frankly about the disappointment at the end, but reflecting on the whole season, stressed the point that those fine margins define playoff games, and we certainly saw that. You take the whole season, which was so great, and then you take the ending, which fizzled out. What are they doing right now? What does that look like going forward as coaches? You wait a little bit, or are they already in motion for next year?
No, I think you've got to be in motion. I mean, if you wait too long, some of the open wounds that you feel aren't there, and you need them. You need to be sensitive to how things were, how they really were. You can't sugarcoat where you're at. You can't sugarcoat where the shortcomings were. You have to look at it from a very factual perspective. And for me, when the wounds are open, it allows me to be sensitive to the situations and the things that we need to get better. If you don't face the brutal facts, then you're not going to improve the following year. So let's just face them. Let's figure out where we fell short, whether it was on the coaching side, on the player side, on the selection side, on the admin side. Take the whole picture, figure out where it was, and how we're going to improve, and then start tackling it and just get it done. Coach Gelker, and I know Nate was over at SIU this weekend. When I was at SIU, Coach Gelker used to say, you win more games in the spring than you do in the fall. And it's all about preparation and having the team set up in the off season for what you're going to do during the season.
Yeah. Dale, we're going to talk to Cale Wasserman, the head coach of SIUE, the OVC champion SIUE Cougars, in our second hour. They're getting ready for the NCAA tournament for the first time in 8 years. It reminds me, too, of a Bear Bryant quote where he says, it's not the will to win that counts, that everybody has that. It's the will to prepare to win, that's where the differentiation starts to happen. And I love the phrase that you use, brutal facts. In your mind, when you look back on not so much the season, but really those last 4 games in particular, the 2 playoff games against Sporting Kansas City, what are the brutal facts?
Yeah, I think the brutal fact is that we need to continue to improve the quality of the player that we're matching up against the top players in the league. And when we're looking at, and that's not a fault on anybody. This is a first year program. You really don't know what you have to deal with until you go through the season and you play everybody. And in our case, the playoffs were much different than the league season. So recognizing that the challenges that the staff face and that the players face are much greater as the year goes on. It becomes crunch time. So, recognizing that and just recognizing that, player for player, we've got to get better, whether that's in development or whether that's through finding more players and knowing that the bar is a little higher than what we had. But look, every expansion team goes through that because you don't know what you don't know until you go through it. You don't know how players are going to react until they get kicked and get punched in the mouth and get knocked down and have to get back up and perform again. You just don't know what you have. So now you got to be brutal in how you assess what you have, and then you've got to look very honestly as to how you're going to replace or how you're going to develop and get guys to raise their level.
It's funny that you say that because I actually have a list in front of me of who I think are on 1-year contracts or the 1-year contracts are up. And Tim Parker said it in the press conference on Wednesday. I think he was the first one to basically say very honestly, hey, you guys have been coming here and coming to practice and seeing a lot of us. You're not going to see some of us, right? Not everybody is going to be back. And on the list I have, if I've got it right, at Bell, Nelson, Marcanic, Watts, Johnny Klein, Jackson, Stroud, Pompeu, Adeniran, and a few others that, could or could not be among that. And it is a part of competitive sports. We see it in other sports as well. But that was kind of like a punch to the gut for me in the moment. I hadn't really thought about that, yeah, these players that we've gotten quite attached to that have done some great things, there'll be some of them that aren't around.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look, they know that. That's the profession and the livelihood that they chose. So when you get asked to pack your bags and move on, you pack your bags and you move on and you land in your new spot, and then you make the most of what you can in your new location, your new team. So 100%, there's going to be guys that we got attached to this year that aren't going to be around, and it's in the club's best interest to try to improve on the players moving out with better players that you're going to bring in.
Dale, you mentioned, that maybe man for man in some of those isolated 1v1 situations, especially in the playoffs, that City found themselves struggling at times and feeling they were a little bit overmatched. There are also some people, and there's no judgment on this one way or the other, but there are some MLS folks who will talk about sort of a trope in MLS that the pressing teams tend to have more success in the regular season and not so much in the playoffs, that the pressing style doesn't translate as well to the playoffs in MLS. Do you subscribe to that, and why or why not?
I mean, I think that it's very difficult to be a one-trick pony in the league. I think and not just the league, in the sport. I was watching South Korea play the U.S. today in the U17 World Cup. United States won, but we had a couple of different ways that we could approach. I watched in particular the first half. South Korea both sat in a mid-block and played on the counterattack, and they also pressed really hard, and the U.S. struggled with both. So I think being able to play with some level of versatility is an important part. Now, for us, we showed the ability to press, and we showed the ability to drop back into the middle third of the field and press out of a mid-block. What we had to get better at was how would we be when teams allow us to have possession of the ball. And I don't know if it's so much a matter of a tactical change on Bradley's part as it is going through that first year like we just discussed and finding players that are able to do both, defend and press the way you want, but also, play in transition, but be good on the ball as well and help you play through teams that are set up and organized.
If you are wondering why we talk to Dale Schilly every week and why we defer to his expertise, it's because while everybody else was having their lazy Sunday morning, maybe setting their fantasy football lineup, Dale Schilly was watching the U.S. and South Korea at the under-17s. That is dedication, and that is soccer acumen. Dale, we appreciate you so much, and regardless of what is ahead for us in the offseason, at the very least, we look forward to talking to you again next season and talking about what these offseason moves might do to allow City to excel next year.
Well, it's been great working with both of you. Jen, thank you very much. Nate, good job this weekend. I watched both the semi and the final, so good stuff.
I should have
And
known.
yeah, look forward to us getting together again.
Dale's sitting in his lair with 8 screens, all of them showing soccer. He's a legend. Dale Shilley joining us here on the St. Louis City Soccer
It's
Report.
either that or he's between 8 fields
That's
watching
exactly
kids
right.
play.
That's exactly right. He's used to it because he's got one eye
That's
on all
right.
8 fields at once. When we get back, another plugged-in soccer guy, Tom Timmerman, will be joining us to talk the St. Louis City season that was, and maybe look ahead a little bit to what he's watching out for in the offseason. You know, he's got his ear to the ground and attuned to what might be to come in these next few months. More St. Louis City Soccer Report after this on KMOX.
What would you give for a child you loved to make their wish come true?
St. Louis City Soccer Report continues on America's Sports Voice, KMOX.
More St. Louis City Soccer Report from our downtown KMOX studios. Nate Gatter, Jennifer Cease with you on this Sunday afternoon until 2 o'clock. Already joined by Dale Shilley. Tom Timmerman is with us now. Bill McDermott will be coming up.
We're bringing in all the troops.
Yeah, it is the big guns today. There is no doubt as we try to put a bow on or make sense of really the 2023 St. Louis City season. Tom Timmerman, thanks so much for being with us. Let's start with, I think, what will be the introductory question for all three of you, which is when you look back on this season now and when you imagine what you'll remember when you look back on it 10, 20 years from now, what comes to the top of your mind?
Oh, gosh. I mean, there's so many kind of mileposts along the way that it was an amazing season. I mean, and, you know, when you think about just what we thought might happen, it exceeded that in every way, shape, and form, with exception maybe the crowds. We thought the crowds would be great. They were great. But just how the team did, no one could have seen that coming. I mean, we're winning the season thinking, you know, maybe they're 8th or 9th and they're getting into that last 2 playoff spots. And boy, wouldn't that be something? And then they just went past that. And, you know, the early playoff exit takes a little bit of the luster off because this is America and we think about things in playoffs and you ask, who had the best record in Major League Baseball this year? At this point, no one remembers that. Rangers won the World Series. But yeah, you look at the season and it went better than anyone could have imagined. And if it ended on a off note, they had some tough breaks at the end. Kansas City was a rough team to get in the first round. The way the schedule played out didn't work in their favor. And, at the end of the year, Kansas City was really hot and City wasn't. But there was just so much out of this season that no one could have expected. And I think you have to embrace that and say, what a great way to start, the history of a franchise.
Tom, you and I were at the same press conference, a very long one, probably the longest one we ever had, where so many players came in along with Lutz and Bradley. And I believe the question was asked to Lutz about, taking those international breaks, right? So where you have international breaks and you don't have games for the MLS. And he admitted that actually, did catch them. It hurt momentum. It interrupted. It's not an excuse because it happened to other teams as well. But some things that they could learn from. I doubt that the MLS is going to change anything anytime soon. But looking at that, I would think that there were a lot of learnings that St. Louis City took from, dealing with a season like MLS to be able to plan for next year.
Yeah, and actually, if you go back a ways, it might have been the League's Cup break that really was where they kind of got off their game. At that point, they won 4 games over about, the last 10 games of the season, which isn't bad, but they weren't quite as pizzazzy, and I'm just making up a word right there, after that point. But yeah, but I think guys learn things. I mean, I think, you look at Edu Leuven, who wanted to play every game, who wanted to be out there, and maybe, they got to say, you know what, you need to, if they want you to take a day off, take a game off. You don't have to be out there as much as you want to play. It is a long season. And it's not just games. I mean, they practiced, even when they had those breaks, they were still practicing a lot. And it really got on them. And you factor that in with a St. Louis summer, it's not easy out there. But yeah, I think the players learned a lot, especially the big names, the Berkeys and Leuvens and Klauses, about what a season like this is like. And it's harder than I think any of them could have imagined coming in.
It's a really good point, Tom, because obviously those guys are used to long seasons. Berkey's probably played more games in a Dortmund season when you factor in cup competitions and European competition and all of that than he did this year. But 2 things. First of all, the travel. Any player who's used to European play, the travel in MLS is on a totally different level than anything they've ever done before. And then you add to that, I think maybe, especially for Leuven, maybe something that he learned, that the season peaks at the end because of playoffs, right? In an ordinary European season where you're just getting to the end of the regular season and crowning the champion based on who has the most points, every game is created equal in the sense that 3 points in April count just the same as 3 points in September. There's no difference between them. Here, the points in April sort of start to diminish in value. It's great to have the number 1 seed, but if you're not in a position to play well in October and November, ultimately those points are sort of hollow. With all of that in mind, is your sense that whether it's player driven or front office driven or coaching staff driven, that City will rotate a little bit more and try to pace their stars, especially a bit more as the season goes on next year?
Yeah, they rotated a lot of guys throughout the season, but yeah, I mean, does a key guy like Leuven need to take more time off? Does Berkey need a break? How will that be for Joachim Nielsen, one of the older guys next year? Tim Parker, had been through it and kind of knew what to get into. But it is weird for these guys, that, unless you've reached the Champions League final, it's not like this at the end of the year where you've played 34 games and now you've got to be at your best. And that was, that's something learned by all of them. And this was a whole team. I mean, not just the international guys, but the domestic guys who hadn't really played a whole lot of playoff games. So that was new for all of them. But they've got to figure that out. And that's, something that they got to, Kansas City did it, not by choice. They had to do it, or actually by choice, not by design. They, because they got such a bad start. But that kind of forced them to get in. And you wonder, I mean, you can play with alternate realities. What if City hadn't clinched, when they'd clinched, after the Sporting KC game? What if the Vancouver game had mattered? and it kept their activity level high until the very end. Did things play out differently? Because after they got just beat Sporting KC, they kind of dialed it back, and they just couldn't get it back when they needed to get it back.
Yeah, this is now this is Gen C inferring. Nobody said these comments to me, but just from us, Tom, sitting there and hearing the players talk as they pass us by on the practice field. You draw a really great comparison. The foreign players definitely not used to the MLS. The new players, of course, they play a lot, but not really used to the MLS from a veteran standpoint. You look at veterans like Tim Parker, was it Jake Nerwinski, and a few others who they've been, even Jared Stroud to an extent, been there, done that. They know how it goes. A few comments that kind of what rolled around here and there when they were in their moments of frustration were, the veterans having to remind the other players, whether they were younger or whether they were foreign players, that, hey, you don't stop working now, right? Like we aren't, just because we've clinched, we cannot have that kind of, fizzling out, so to speak. And even though you try not to, there is a mental thing around that. And many of them talked about, just not having necessarily their mindset where it needed to be.
Yeah, and that was one of the things they learned. And I go back to the beginning of the season. Lutz Pfannenstiel said, but you know what? This year is about learning. We're going to be really good in year 2. And that was what kind of they were looking at all along.
Yeah, right.
Year 1 was going to be this exploratory thing for everybody, first time through it. But when you got these guys experience and they've been through it before, that was when, they were thinking that's when things are going to click in. The expectations they had for year 2 were much higher. Now we got to think about what's that going to be like in year 2 now. What does that look like? Because also, if you look at the numbers this year, they really got better results than they should have. If you look at what, the underlying analytics and what their goal difference was compared to what their expected goal difference was. Their expected goal difference, they were in the red and they came up in the black. And there's a few things that work into that. And some of that, though, says regression to the mean, they're not going to do as well next year. So then it's going to be a question, can the general improvement that everybody has overcome the fact that they overperformed this season?
That leads us sort of perfectly, I think, into some offseason questions that are obviously now at the forefront of everybody's mind, even though the MLS playoffs still have plenty of room left. For City, it's offseason. What are, the first major hurdles in your mind? Where do you think what are the things that City fans should be locking in on first, second, third as we go through the offseason to see this team start to take shape in what's going to be a relatively short offseason for City because they qualified for CONCACAF Champions Cup next year?
Yeah, that's one of the amazing things about Major League Soccer is how short. If you get to the championship game, you're playing on December 9th, and then you could be playing a game that matters in the second week in February. So it's really worse if you lose the championship game. If you win the championship game, you get a bye in the first round of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Second, you're in there right away. Yeah, coming up December 1st is when they have to pick up options on players. There are a lot of the younger guys on this team have options in their contract. So we'll have to see if they'll be the first, situation of people that aren't coming back. And then from there, the transfer window will open shortly, but, Pfannenstiel has said he doesn't like the winter transfer window as much as the summer one, because the winter one is you're picking up guys in the European mid-season. And so you're getting guys that teams are looking to get rid of. And so it's not as good as in the off season when you can make a deal for someone. So I don't know exactly how much they're going to do. Obviously they have to make changes, because guys will be leaving. There are, John Nelson, I see, no way in which he's coming back after not being on the game day roster for the past, last 3 months of the season. So there will be openings. The transfer market, that's one of the best things about soccer is the market is so global that there are guys in Europe. And if you can find guys in Europe, you can go and get them and bring them in. And if you bring them in, at least in the winter, you do have a whole training camp to get them ready. That was a problem for Knut Thoresen, for him getting up to speed, is that he was jumping into a situation mid-season. Marcanic kind of surprised everybody by being able to do it, but Thoresen didn't. Nielsen will have a full off season, but what we've seen enough about St. Louis City to know Dansville's not going to go out and get a big money, big name guy you've heard of. That's just not his style. It's not what he's looking for. And so if you've been, scrutinizing, Icelandic or Belgian or Dutch, or, pick some second tier European league soccer, that's probably where Banfield looking at this point, or the Bundesliga second division. And so, Banfield had a really good job on finding guys that fit his system. And that's what he's going to be looking at. Do they need someone up front, to be more clinical in the attack, which even though they had all some goal scorers, to have someone who is better in that situation? Do they need help on the back line more at this point? Or are they good with Marcanic at left back, or how's Kyle Hebert fit in? So those are probably the areas you look at, but we're not going to see, I would expect, a dazzling big, off-season, acquisition from Fansfield, because that's just not the way, he's built on building this team. Now, they do have one designated player spot. Can they do something with that? And maybe not in getting a big name, but in getting someone they have to pay a transfer fee for, which would go into that as well. So it'll happen fast, because camp will open like probably January 8th or something. And we won't have a whole lot of time to think about this.
Tom, we appreciate your insight as always. Thanks so much.
Nate, Jen, see you around. Thanks for having me.
Tom Timmerman, who covers St. Louis City for the Post-Dispatch. You can follow him on Twitter at TomTim. Quick break. Bill McDermott will be with us next. This is the St. Louis City Soccer Report on KMOX.
Hi, I'm Jim Brennan. In celebration of McKelvey Homes' 125th anniversary,
KMOX.
Welcome back on the St. Louis City Soccer Report. Jennifer Cease here with Nate Gatter, and joined now by Mr. Soccer himself, Bill McDermott. Bill, thanks for your time.
Sure, Jen. How you been?
Pretty good.
Hey, how are
pretty
you?
good. The beautiful game never.
What's new down there?
The beautiful game never stops, even though St. Louis City has stopped at this point in time. One question, Nate, that we haven't asked that I thought that we should have done with both Dale and Tom Timmerman, but we can ask Mr. McDermott, is, Bill, When it comes
Yes,
to
ma'am.
who wins the MLS playoffs, as St. Louis City, do you want it to be KC? Do you want to say, hey, it took the MLS champ to beat us? Or do we just want KC to go out of spite?
Neither for me, Jen. I want the Columbus Crew to win.
Well, you have some ties there, yeah?
Well, that's why. But also, and more importantly, as a follow-up to one of our prior conversations about this, not only do I want Columbus to win, I definitely want LAFC to win. Now, you may say, why do you look at it that way? I'll tell you why. I do not want the potential of MLS Cup to be on an artificial surface field.
Good point.
That's my reason.
Amen, Bill.
Good point.
You got your mind in the right place, Bill. This is why we have you on the show.
Yeah. And it doesn't go without saying too, is when we think about the people who are in the running and possibly the top teams, they're going to have top coaches. But as much as City did not finish, Bradley Carnell is still in the running for Coach of the Year with MLS, and he's just won the MAC's Sports Personality of the Year.
Jen, in the running is, are we having a vote on this? And this, believe me, no disrespect to my very good friend Pat Noonan, who did a magnificent job and has been doing a fabulous job with Cincinnati. But Bradley, what he did with his staff, obviously, but to assemble this team in not a real short period of time. They did have an extra year, remember, but nonetheless, he fully ingrained these players who came from literally nowhere and were nobodies. To quote Bradley, everybody was nobody, but the way he brought them together to play conclusively as a team, I don't think there's any question whatsoever who the Coach of the Year is in Major League Soccer.
Bill, when you look back on this season, how do you think you'll remember it? What do you think will stand out top of your mind?
The way that it hit the city of St. Louis resoundingly, and nobody expected it to be so resounding. Everybody thought, I thought that yes, they'll do okay. They'll be competitive, but not to this extent. So they win at home. They do so conclusively in front of 22,463 people. They revolutionize the way MLS is looked at, not just in a particular city, but around the country. And they do it in a way that has never been accomplished in the history of Major League Soccer dating back to 96. And by that, I mean, they have everything. A field, by the way, on which you can play a World Cup game right now. You can go down there right now and play a World Cup game. But training site, locker rooms, offices, team store, everything in the heart of your city, which further adds impact to the sport of soccer in your city, where it should be being the birthplace of the sport in our country, and maybe the way that other sports are looked at in the very near future, to have everything centralized in one area, in your downtown area in particular.
Hey, and how about that Roman Berkey, right? Goalkeeper of the year. I mean, it was only Kansas City's, in my opinion, Melia, who, for me, kind of stood up to Berkey in terms of being able to perform some of the amazing things. But Roman Berkey consistently, for the most part, all year long, I think we forget sometimes like how many times he made City as good as they were in results because of the amazing things he did.
Fabulous goalkeeper, Jen. And he, to follow up to what you just said, I don't know the number, but conservatively estimating 5, 6, 7 games that he won for the team by himself. Not just with his shot-stopping abilities, his control of the penalty area. He's good with his feet, but his distribution as well. How about the last Kansas City game when he saw Klaus isolated with the last defender and sends one of those long side volleys that he usually sends during the course of the year, a one hopper right to the forward's feet, inch perfect. So one pass, you're in the other team's penalty area. He's clearly the best goalkeeper in the league this year, and justifiably was voted so.
Bill, I think about this season, and I just I can't get the sour taste out of my mouth at the end. I know nothing that we have said, no positive things are untrue. I
Right.
feel like I look around and sometimes I wonder if everybody else was watching the same team because I can't get the feeling, especially sitting there in the stadium and watching that first playoff game. I just thought they so let themselves down from how they had played during the regular season. What went wrong? Why was the press so impotent? Why were Kansas City able to break the
And
lines
at
even with the
home.
ball on the ground so easily
And at
in
home.
a primetime game at home? It just seemed like it was lining up so well for City to reverse their fortune, get back to themselves, and they just couldn't do it. Why?
Uh, a couple things, I think, Nate. One of which Roman Berkey, speaking of him, said that I think we lost a little bit of ourselves when we first clinched into playoffs. Training wasn't as aggressive, which had been a trademark of this team from day one. The Kansas City game, the first game at home, you were beaten by world-class goals. Berkey could have been in goal, so could have Manuel Neuer and Peter Schmeichel. Three of them could have been in there at one time. Nobody stopping Logan and Dembe's shot. But some of the things that really, really hurt them late in the year, big, basic mistakes, having goals scored off of throw-ins, a lot of giveaways, too many giveaways against any kind of a team, especially one that is absolutely red hot coming into this stage of the season. Not a good use of set pieces, which was so conspicuous because they had been potent on that all year long. Maybe some lapse defending at times, but when you say the lapse defending, as Charlie Spooner once said, the coach of the basketball Bills, the other team's on scholarship too.
Right.
They have players who can play, and I think for Kansas City, Alan Polito was one of their most dangerous players because he more or less floated. He kind of freelanced in those last two games, and he went where he wanted to go. More importantly, he went where the ball was to destroy the game. I think with the use of the two forwards in the second game at Kansas City, I've always liked two forwards, never liked one forward. Brian McBride, no other person other than Brian McBride said, I do not like one forward. When I was the one forward myself, I just didn't like it. I need somebody as a combination next to me. But you have to build that combination on a regular basis. I always liked two forwards. I would always like two forwards to be in the first 11. You have to build it up to have a good relationship. Both players stand alongside of each other. Does one show? Does one go deep? Does one go back to the center circle? Does one go out to the corner flag? Does the other one occupy the penalty area all the time? You just don't know that on a regular basis. But for a debut season, Nate, I know what you're saying, and Jen as well. It defied expectations, and I think was record-breaking by any kind of a measure you might install.
Certainly, that's true. Bill, we appreciate your time so much. Sorry,
Sure.
a shorter segment as we get here to the end of the hour, but we appreciate you as always. Look forward to more chats.
It's probably because Cease isn't following the format.
That's exactly right.
Hey, you guys.
Exactly right. You can't trust her. Bill McDermott, Mr. Soccer,
All right,
with
guys.
us
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye now.
here on KMOX this afternoon. Hope you're going to stay with us for our second hour. We're going to change gears a little bit. Alex Pfeiffer, St. Louis's own, I suppose now Kansas City's own.
What a
Signing with the
final.
KC Current, and she's going to be talking to us about herself, but also about that NWSL championship, a wild one last night, a 2-1 win for Gotham FC over OL Reign. That we'll also be talking some college soccer because a lot is going on locally. SIUE won the conference championship, the first ever in the OVC last night. They'll find out their fate in the NCAAs tomorrow. Katie Shields and the St. Louis Billikens women got a win over Indiana on Friday night. They're moving on to the second round. And the McHenry Bearcats are up 1-0 in the GLVC championship against Lewis. All that's coming up in the second hour. Stay with us. The St. Louis City Soccer Report on KMOX.
By texting 26022, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Tax Lien Code. Message and data rates
Y98 presents the St. Louis City Soccer Report on America's Sports Voice, KMOX.
Welcome back into the St. Louis downtown studios here on the St. Louis City Soccer Report. Hour number 2 with Nate Gatter. We talked all St. Louis City, but time now to shift into some other things that are going on in soccer because there's always soccer. Did you see the NWSL final? Did you get to see any? I know you were working, Nate. Did you get to see any clips from it?
I saw the end of it. I watched probably the last 20 minutes, and there was a lot of good stuff in there.
A lot of excitement. You know, the OL reign should have reigned supreme, but they did not. They were upset by FC Gotham, who took that, and just what a spectacular and a little bit of a crazy finish as well, with the goalkeeper handball and all kinds of things. Welcome in somebody different, she can kind of give us an analysis, but also Alex Pfeiffer is the first, I think, St. Louis signing. She signed with Kansas City Current. She's 15 years old and she is now a pro. Alex, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, way to be, stud. Way to get signed. You know, you and I sat and talked a little bit earlier. A podcast dropped today from this the Soccer Dad pod, and that podcast dropped with you and I having a much more in-depth conversation. So this will be a shorter one, but real quick, your thoughts on the final last night. What'd you think?
I thought it was a crazy ending. I thought it was a really competitive final, just in general. I mean, sometimes you see finals that just 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, kind of not much action, but I feel like there was so much action throughout the whole game, and it really shows how competitive the league is.
Yeah, it seemed like at any moment you could look in either end. The transitions were amazing in the middle of the field, but in either end, it was kind of like, okay, who's in whose box right now? And all of them getting pretty dangerous.
Yeah, I think for sure. It could have gone either way. I mean, huge congratulations to Gotham. I mean, they finished their chances, I think, better than Reign did.
Yeah, I mean, they went from worst to first. You know, we've seen upsets in MLS, and you can see it here in NWSL. And also, you know, what was so cool is watching with one of my daughters, looking at players who played together on the U.S. women's national team as competitors there on the pro circuit.
Yeah, it was really cool to see. I mean, there's so many national team players on both teams that were going against each other, and it was just a battle.
Alex, obviously nobody at your age gets to this level without having played against players who are older than them, right? You start getting bumped up a grade or two. Probably you've been doing that for quite some time, but it's quite another thing altogether to be a 15-year-old professional. What's that been like for you playing with players who are 10, if not 20 years your senior? How have they welcomed you in and kind of started to show you the ropes?
Yeah, I think just being in Kansas City, even though they didn't make playoffs, and just train with them the whole month of October, a lot of them really welcomed me in and showed me like what they do and like how it's going to work. And it was a great experience for me. And I'm really excited to get started next season. I think they all lead by example. So it's great to see and have so many leaders in front of me who can really guide me in the right direction to becoming a really top professional player.
You know, Charles Boehm is a writer that we often have on this show. He writes about MLS, about all things soccer, covers the women's game. He put a little post out last night, Alex, on Twitter that talked about FC Gotham or Gotham FC and said, back in the day, players lived in a house with plastic bags for windows. Their travel issues could have made one of these funny movies, a documentary. They faced less than professional choice of doing they usually have kit men, right? But they were doing their own laundry. Didn't get medical bills paid on time, like had porta potties at a training facility. You've spent time in now Kansas City's stadium dedicated to the women's team. Hearing those kinds of things, how does that hit you at what a contrast the game has come from to where it is now for women?
I think just hearing that and seeing that has happened like before that I've signed a professional contract I think it's crazy. And I mean, it shouldn't happen in the first place. I think the women should be treated just like the men and they should have their own facility. And so I think it's crazy how much time has changed. And I think even more is going to change in the next few years.
Alex, obviously, you know, you're very early days in your professional career and you might well have 20 or more years of professional soccer still in front of you. So understandably, you're focused on, you know, one day at a time and the task at hand. That said, just from somebody in your generation, I want to get a sense of what the perception is. If you're 3, 5, 10 years down the line in your career, and as you said, able to follow this example that's in front of you and establish yourself as a top professional, Do you see yourself playing in the U.S. all the way through, or are you intrigued at all? Do you have any ambition or interest in trying to play in Europe or somewhere abroad?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, I am really excited to play in the U.S., but I also think for me, it's been a dream of mine to play in Europe and get that experience at some of the top clubs over there and just see what it's really about. And I mean, I watch it on TV and it's some of the best soccer I've seen. So I would really, really love to be a part of that. But I also think playing in the U.S. is a dream of mine. Getting to play in front of St. Louis, hopefully one day that would be a dream. So I think both I'm really excited to do.
Hey, Alex, I think you should tell Nate who your favorite European team is.
Yeah, I like watching Man City. I think they're my favorite team.
You got him. I knew he was going to have that reaction.
Sadly, they tied this morning. I mean, tough. It was a great game, but tough tie.
Well, Alex, nobody is faultless. So I will still be watching.
Don't listen to him, Alex. You could totally take him on the pitch right now.
There's no doubt. There is no doubt. Alex, we appreciate you so much. Thanks so much for being with us.
And this is not the last interview. We want you to come back on.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
We cannot wait to be rooting you on it and watch more. Alex Pfeiffer with us. We'll be watching her next NWSL season in Kansas City.
Are you okay, Nate? Are you okay?
Yeah, that did drive it. I was liking her so much, and then you just drove the stake right in between us for no reason.
She's awesome. She's awesome. I love her.
We're going to turn our attention to the college game when we return. SIUE head coach Cale Wasserman will be with us after the break on KMOX.
Do you have 3 ex-wives and your current trophy wife wants a life insurance policy 3
second hour of the St. Louis City Soccer Report. Nate Gatter, Jennifer Cease with you on KMOX, and we are pleased to be joined by the fifth-year head coach of the SIUE Cougars men's soccer team, Cale Wasserman, now the first ever OVC men's soccer champions. The SIUE Cougars with a 1-0 victory over Incarnate Word last night in Edwardsville, finished off an unbeaten regular season and conference tournament, 19 games. They've won 16. They've drawn 3, and they will find out their fate tomorrow, where they're headed for the NCAA tournament, which could mean a game as soon as Thursday. Cale, thanks so much for being with us. First of all, congratulations. What did you think of that first ever OVC men's soccer tournament?
Yeah, I mean, first off, thanks for having me. Go Cougars. Obviously, I'm a big fan of what we're doing here, but of the game from you guys, whether it's college or pro, and what you guys do. But no, it was an excellent event. We were thrilled to be hosting. I thought our facilities people and the organizers, tournament director Eric Chris did a great job to put it together. But the fans actually were the icing on the cake. I mean, obviously we had 2 great performances, a couple of really special goals, but we got a lot of love and support from the community and our students and other teams coming out to support. And late in the game last night when it was only 1-0 and time was ticking down and we needed that extra boost, I thought the crowd was phenomenal.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought the crowd was really fantastic Wednesday and then as well last night when it was a lot colder than Wednesday. They were more committed. You had to be more committed to be out there for the full 90 minutes last night. You mentioned those special goals. Nacho Abial, who obviously was a big part of what you did in the regular season, but only had 2 goals in the regular year, scored all 3 of your goals, the brace in the semifinal win over Lindenwood, and then the lone goal of the game last night against Incarnate Word. And the first and third ones of the tournament in particular were just spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, those 2 goals are as good as any college goal that I've ever seen, just from not only an individual effort on the first one, but how he took it, how he turned through pressure, beat a couple guys, going at speed against an all-conference goalie to tuck it away. But last night, group effort, and he capped it off. It's just an amazing finish. But I thought our whole front group pressed well. Some good combination play from Jake Karolzak and Steph Morera. But man, what a finish last night. And I just, those are the moments you never forget. And, he got his reward last night because he's worked so hard and he's created so much danger for us. He draws fouls. He gives us width. He presses well. And, he just hadn't maybe tucked the ball in the back of the net as much as he would have liked, but he certainly saved it for the right moments. And he had 3 goals in 2 games in the tournament, was clearly the difference maker.
Cale, if I remember right, we had you on this show like not long after the Bronze Boot, where you guys were able to upset the SLU men as well, and just kind of touch base. Then, when you're kind of in more of the beginning of the season, it kind of doesn't seem like it's been that long. We just wrapped up, of course, MLS season with St. Louis City, which is a much longer season. But regardless of that, postseason play and getting into postseason play, we find no matter if it's college, pro, any other kind of amateur sport, can be very different than the regular season. How have you managed to make sure that the guys are focused and bringing that same level that maybe you were able to have more in the middle of the season or maybe finding in the beginning of the season? How do you do that for playoffs?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that I'll probably address with that. And one of them is something that we talked about yesterday in our pregame team meal. We met at 2:30 yesterday. We usually meet about 3.5 hours before kickoff. And one of the things that we've addressed all year is a pet peeve of mine is when coaches or players say, it's playoff time now. It's time to ratchet it up or, ramp it up or take things to the next level. And one of the things that we've really tried hard at, basically since last spring, when we came together and knew that we wanted to bounce back after a season that we weren't satisfied with, was we wanted to kind of put our foot, pedal to the metal every day at training and at the beginning through preseason into the early games. So come this time of year, we don't have to say, okay, now it's time to step it up. It's no, this is what we do every day. This is what we're prepared for. So I think that's really helped us and put us in this position to be playing late into the season. But the other thing I want to address is just our leadership in the group. I mean, we have a very, very experienced group, a lot of seniors who have been through some hard times, ups and downs together, some shared experiences. And the culture in the group is amazing. But I think that's spearheaded by our 2 captains, Sam Gomez, who's from Webster Groves, and Al-Sadiq Hassan, who's from Lindbergh area. And they've just been amazing. You know, we have a good mix of domestic and international guys on our team, but to have two fifth-year seniors from the St. Louis area leading our team has allowed me to focus on, you know, more of the soccer, more individual meetings, and they really take a lot of ownership and making sure the group is up for it every day. And I think when it comes from the players, it helps move the needle. You know, I think, one, I talk a lot, and so eventually my words are going to go in one ear and out the other. But when you have players reiterating your points or, you know, helping push the group, and you know, whether that means putting their arm around a guy and helping him out or putting their foot down and holding the guy accountable, I think that's when you get into a conversation of, you know, special teams. And I think our leadership and experience is paying some dividends now, and I want to keep these guys rolling. But again, I'm just a bit of a facilitator. At the end of the day, the players are the ones doing the job on the field and in the locker room, and could not credit this group of players anymore.
That's a great point you make about, you know, trying not to be in a position where you're having to ramp up for the postseason. And certainly you guys, as evidenced by 19 games unbeaten, have been able to establish that level of consistency and that culture of bringing it every day. And to be fair, we all know that the NCAA tournament is anything but uncharted territory for SIUE soccer. This is an enormously decorated program that's won a national championship at both the Division I and Division II levels. But it's been a while. It's been 8 years since SIUE were in the NCAA tournament. That was 2016, the last time the Cougars went. So obviously it's going to be new for most, if not all, the players who are on the roster. Maybe they played postseason at, you know, you've got some NAIA and Division II transfers. Maybe they played postseason there. What, if anything, changes in your preparation, or will you try to preach? Maybe nothing changes, but what will you try to preach to make sure they're ready for the challenge that's going to be ahead?
More than anything is just playing selflessly and playing for each other. You know, I don't think the X's and O's need to change. I think our guys will be up for it. It's just managing those tough moments when there's the pressure of kind of every game turns into a one-off final. And, you know, how do you respond when you go down a goal, or, you know, there's a bad call, or a ref, you know, you get a goal called back. I think those are the things when the mentality overtakes the tactics. And that's something that we'll harp on, is just the mental side of it and the selflessness and playing together, because, you know, this time of year there is a lot of pressure, and regardless of how well you're playing, you might not get the bounce you wanted, or you might give up an unfortunate error. And I think if you can keep in it mentally and play for each other, it helps just push you through the tough moments. And I think the teams that end up going the farthest are not necessarily always the talented teams. Certainly they are. Every team in the NCAA tournament is talented. But if you look at the teams that actually make deep runs or win a championship, a lot of times it's the teams that are the most together, have the best culture. They're the most in tune mentally. And I think we're a talented, experienced team for sure. And I think we've exemplified some of the things we're saying, but to double down on some of those factors now could be the difference making of a loss versus a win, or, you know, stepping up in a penalty shootout. It's a lot about confidence and mentality rather than talent. And I'm a believer in that. And so I think we're going to try to double down on the mental side and the teamwork and selflessness aspects. And hopefully the soccer will continue to be there as it has been. But I think our culture is what can separate us.
You know, I'm grinning at Nate right now, Kale, because I teach the mental side of the game to younger players, and it's so important, right? And we've heard you say it now. Alex Pfeiffer has been on a recent podcast for the NWSL talking about one of the things she shifted was to her mental game. The St. Louis City talked about how they struggled with the mental part of that game. You know, you've taught the skilling and the drilling, right? The touches for so long. Do you know when it shifted, or when we've started to have so much focus on that mental part as being what might get you to where you need to be?
You know, I think if you're just aware a little more, like sometimes it is easy to get wrapped up in the X's and O's, and I've been guilty of it even in one or two of my previous seasons here, to be honest, is where, you know, where you think the culture is where it needs to be, and you start putting so much emphasis on what you're writing on the chalkboard, or, you know, little set plays you're designing, or the tactics. And, you know, it's not just the mental side from a group perspective, but, you know, taking more time to pull guys aside and have conversations about their confidence or their struggles and their adversity, and giving guys belief. But no, I think there's been a shift globally. There's, even off the field, just the mental health side of things, the amount of research just on that whole environment. It's becoming much more prominent in conversations on a day-to-day basis off the field as well as on the field. So you think about the growing field of sports psychology or mental performance coaches. And we have some decent resources here for sure that we try to take advantage of. But, I talk a lot to the guys about just looking themselves in the mirror on a daily basis and holding themselves accountable and giving themselves their own self-belief. Because at the end of the day, like, you want belief from others, you want, people giving you confidence, but deep down there has to be something coming from inside of yourself. And we've got a really strong group with that. Nobody's perfect, but I think our mental, certainly right now, it helps that when you're doing well, is at a very high level. But we also, to get to this point, we went through a lot of struggles. And I think sometimes that's a big part of it, is when you push through a tough moment or a tough season or a tough injury, oftentimes there's light at the other end of it, but it's hard to sustain the mental fortitude to maybe get there. And I think a lot of our guys have done that. And now it's, we're in a position where I feel very confident with it. But, at the end of the day, we have to match that mental stuff with also technical performances, physical performances, a lucky bounce here or there. There's just so much that goes into the formula of winning a championship. And I think our guys have shown it through the regular season and conference tournament, but it's a new season now, and everything I'm saying, are probably a lot of the similar words of whoever we're going to come across. We're going to come across in the next round, first round of the NCAA tournament, a very strong-willed, mentally tough, talented, technical, good physical team as well. So, it's we'll have 90 to, I guess, 110 minutes to prove ourselves, and we're really looking forward to the opportunity.
Well, we're looking forward to watching you, Cale. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate your time, and best of luck with the selection show tomorrow and ultimately round one, and hopefully more coming up this week.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the coverage, guys. Go Cougars.
Cale Wasserman, the head coach of the SIUE Cougars men's soccer team, the OVC champions in the first year of men's soccer in the Ohio Valley Conference. The men's soccer selection show for that Division I NCAA tournament will be noon Central Time tomorrow. SIUE will find out where they are headed. When we take a break, a team that already knows where they're headed, the St. Louis Billikens women's soccer team head coach Katie Shields will be with us after the break on KMOX.
Manchester Coin and Jewelry is the estate
City Soccer Report continues on America's Sports Voice, KMOX.
Second hour continues into our final half hour now of the St. Louis City Soccer Report, and we are joined by Katie Shields, the head coach of the St. Louis Billikens women's soccer team, who won a really enjoyable 2-0 game on a cold Friday night at Herman Stadium in the first round of the NCAA tournament over the visiting Indiana Hoosiers, who had a few fans there, but they were vastly outnumbered by a packed house of Billikens fans. Got the early penalty. They added a second on a corner late on in the first half and really controlled the game from there. Coach, thanks a lot for being with us. I want to sort of jump right into something because I was there, and one of the things that my eye was drawn to over the course of the game was how aggressive the Indiana coaching staff were with the referees and the fourth official almost the entire game. And you don't have to comment on that one way or the other, but you have a much, much more reserved style than I think we normally see from a lot of head coaches. You don't do a lot of pacing of the sideline. Your communication is generally with your own players, not so much with the referees. What goes into that, if anything? Is it a strategic decision? Is it just your personality? What contributes to your style in contrast to what we see from some other staffs?
Yeah, I think it is a combination of personality. I am a pretty even keel person. Not to say, I'm as competitive as they come, but I think in our preparation with our team and how we approach the game, that they do the work. They set the tone of the game and really try to focus on the things we can control. I think it's also maybe just some of my experience. Been in those moments before. Knows what works, knows what doesn't. If we want our team to perform under pressure, I have to be, kind of that leading force. And so, again, not to comment on maybe what the other side, but that is very consistently who we are and how we like to go about our performances.
Katie, you and I have talked a couple of times and on this show and other. I'm looking back to a conversation that we had. I still have my notes from it from October 7th, where I had it sitting here and I'm like, oh, what did I ask her back then? And at the time, your record was 9-2-2. You had been unbeaten in the last 8 games at that point in time. And you and I were talking about, the successful season on paper and looking at, a little bit more than a month later. I mean, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but so much happens in that short period of time for college soccer. How have you managed to maintain that and not have the dip that we kind of expect sometimes to come?
Yeah, I think, it's wild that much those many games, right? The championships have all been accomplished in that time. And I think we haven't just maintained our level. I think this team, one of their special qualities about this particular year's team is they've continued to grow and get better into the season. And so I think that I attribute it to that. I also attribute, we're a little unique in our program. Most women's college soccer teams bring their student athletes back in early July and they do a bunch of running and lifting and you're not able to practice yet, but they're on campus. And we found we actually bring our women back a month later in August for the real start of preseason. And we find they stay fresh and they stay, they're not burnt out when we get to October, November. And so I attribute it a little bit to just that growth mindset, but also how they prepared for this long journey.
Coach, what most excited you, what most impressed you about not only the hot start you had and the execution on the set piece, but then also how well your players managed the game in the second half, and it felt like there was very little for Indiana creatively in the final third, that really all they could do was try to dribble past somebody and fire away from 20 yards. What impressed you the most, or what do you think allowed your team to control the game so well in the final 45?
Yeah, I think it started with their preparation throughout the week. Our women, I mean, the second, the name was called and Indiana, the opponent, I mean, they had a very professional approach, maybe some lessons learned for those that have been in the program from previous postseason experiences. I will also say our staff, our associate head coach, Chris Allen, and assistant coach Cal McKee did an unbelievable job preparing our women for Indiana with a clear game plan and say, hey, this is how they will beat us. From them. And then our women, I mean, they just came out. And again, I think you see the experience of our women shine and that, the maturity and realizing that if they stick to the game plan, if they perform to their abilities, they're going to have success. And it was one of our most disciplined and quote professional performances in my time at SLU. But I think it was a team that was primed for that performance.
Well, obviously, things are disciplined and professional on the physical aspect, but because you brought it up, you said the words growth mindset. And Kale Wasserman was just on, and he talked about the importance of his team's success with the mental side of the game. Of course, you got to have the physical, but the mental in terms of bringing you so far and then bringing you further. Is that something you have found with this group might maybe different than previous groups you've coached in terms of their mental discipline and being able to remain, the ability to keep growing and keep learning and probably getting over failures and things like that on their mental game?
Absolutely. And just to be clear, when I say disciplined and professional, I mean, if you watch our sideline pregame, they're dancing to Hannah Montana. So
that's healthy. That's healthy mentally.
It is. It is. It's not, I wouldn't say we run the tightest ship. But I think that is healthy. And so it's easy to grow when you're enjoying what you're doing. It's easy to grow. Yes, there is going to be adversity, and trust me, we have had it. Yes, there's going to be setbacks, and of course, we've had it this year and throughout many of our women's time in the program. But I do think when there is joy at the forefront, it's just easier to be engaged, right? When you're laughing, when you love the people that you're around on a day-to-day basis, I do think, again, it's easier to learn and grow because you're looking forward to the next opportunity.
The SLU women will be heading on to take on Georgetown, who narrowly escaped in double overtime 2-1 over Old Dominion. That game will happen in State College, Pennsylvania. Penn State will be hosting the next two rounds as the highest seed in this pod of the bracket. Obviously, Coach Shields, you have developed a program that is winning at a level very rarely seen in any sport anywhere over recent years. And obviously, by the same token, like you said, maybe lessons learned for some of these players. There have been trips up, they've tripped up at times in the first round of the tournament. This is the fourth time in program history, second time in the last 3 years through to the round of 32. Bearing all that in mind, obviously you don't want to change what you do. You don't want to put too much pressure on your players just because it's now the second round and a chance to get through to that Sweet 16 where this program hasn't been. How do you make sure that your players, whether it's amping them up or trying to cool them off, are in the best place mentally to be at their best against Georgetown?
Yeah, they will be. We will be there. And I don't think it's a whole lot different than any other game we have approached. We're very focused on always the next opponent, the next preparation. Again, I trust our staff will do a first-class job of preparing our women for what Georgetown will bring. But our emphasis going into Friday night against Indiana, our emphasis going into Friday afternoon against Georgetown will be us. Be true to our identity, be who we are, put the best version of SLU soccer out there. And again, I believe if we do that, we now have the talent, the experience, the potential to advance past Georgetown into the Sweet 16. Our women, they know what's on the line. They know what Georgetown brings with streaming and social media these days. There's not a lot of secrets out there. And so, for us, it's again to focus on us and just that next step at a time. And again, like we started this conversation off, controlling what we can control in that pressurized environment.
Katie, it feels like not so long ago that the highest level that girls and women had to look to, really before having a lot of access to the U.S. women's national team was the college level. It's kind of like where it was and where it kind of stopped. But it was, I wondered at your thoughts, and you had your own game. But of course, the NWSL had their final, a crazy final, an amazing final where, Gotham FC upset OL Reign, who are at the top. Just having people like that to look up to, your girls, young women, to be able to look to other young women who are perhaps playing in that league, and whether it's a path they want to or not, but that kind of impact on the other types of the games, that whether it's college or youth games, the impact of having that level at a pro of being able to look at for your players and younger.
No, it's changed so much even since I grew up and played. And I think we're so fortunate that the league, this country has finally found a sustainable professional women's soccer league. I mean, the NWSL, what a final, what a great advertisement for the women's pro game. It was entertaining. It was goals. It was, it was lively. The stars of the game on display. I was also, speaking about our women, so proud. We had our first professional NWSL player, Maddie Picorni. She just signed a 2-year contract with Louisville Racing on Thursday. She was actually in attendance on Friday night. So our first real modern era pro, and seeing her continuing to grow. And then I think when you look at the crowd, you guys mentioned Friday night, it was actually the second largest first round crowd in NCAA women's soccer. BYU, Utah State had us beat, but that's a local rivalry. And so I think, having over 3,000 people watch our women in playoff soccer, those young girls in the stands, what more could you ask for? And again, I bet there are future Billikens who are in that crowd, and what a great role models for them to see play the game at a high level.
That's a great bet. I think you're probably right about that. I am not a future member of your team one way or another.
And I'm far too past for that.
I would love to be, but my dad and I were there, and we had a great time. It was a big crowd, a very engaged crowd. It was a lot of fun. Coach, we are really looking forward to watching you guys Friday against Georgetown. All the best, and hopefully a number of games still to come.
Thank you both. Thanks for having me.
Katie Shields, the head coach of the St. Louis Billikens women's soccer team. It's 2:00 Central Time on Friday afternoon. They'll be taking on Georgetown in University Park, Pennsylvania, the home of the Penn State Nittany Lions. I don't see any streaming information available for that just yet on that website, but keep an eye out on St. Louis social media. You can follow them at St. Louis Women's Soccer, and you can go to slewbillikens.com, get more information on that as the TV situation is clarified in the week to come. We'll take a final break and be back to wrap up the show. Stay with us. More St. Louis City Soccer Report after this on America's Sports Voice, KMOX.
Del Walmsley and the Wealth Cycle. This is X.
Wrapping up the St. Louis City Soccer Report on this Sunday afternoon. Nate Gatter, Jennifer Cease with you. What an all-star group of guests that we had today. maybe the biggest names top to bottom that we've had for a show altogether. First hour, wrapping up the St. Louis City season, talking to Dale Schilly, Tom Timmerman, talking as well to Bill McDermott. That's a pretty big trio right there. And then in our second hour, Alex Pfeiffer, I thought did a great job, just 15 years old, handled the interview like the pro that she now is after signing with the Kansas City Current. Hopefully just a training ground for her ultimate destination of coming back to St. Louis when an NWSL team is available. I'm sure she will be jonesing to get out of Kansas City. Is it just to give her a taste of how much she actually hates them deep down? And then Cale Wasserman, head coach of SIUE's men's team, Katie Shields, the head coach of the SLU women's team, who both joined us as well. But I thought it was interesting, too. I felt a little bad asking her because she's 15 years old. How does she, she doesn't need to, probably shouldn't have grand plans for how her life is going to go year by year. She's just signed a professional contract. She has more than enough on her plate to figure out how to be next year a 16-year-old rookie in the NWSL. That's plenty to work on. But I just wanted to get a sense because I think as the NWSL is stabilizing and growing, they're not growing as fast as especially the big clubs in Europe are. They're not putting the resources in that the Barcelonas are, that the Olympic Lyons are in France, that the top clubs in England are, that Chelsea are. There are not $1 million players here in the way that Sam Kerr is in England. And as a result, we've seen even big name American players who are not just going on those short-term loans like they always were to Europe, but who are finding a home there and staying, like the Lindsey Horans of the world. And I thought it was interesting just to get from her perspective and her generation's perspective, to whatever degree she represents it. If you were good enough, do you view ultimately playing in Europe as a step above the NWSL? And I wouldn't say she went as far as to say that, but she did say it was a dream of hers to play in Europe.
Yeah.
Which I think, as compared to 5 or 10 years ago, you wouldn't have heard from a 15-year-old women's soccer prodigy, and is a little bit of, it's a good sign for the women's game, not such a good sign for the NWSL.
Yeah, and I think the one of the goals scored last night was by Esther, correct? I think, but one of the goals scored. So we have some of that, international pieces over here, and there has been discussion. Some really good podcasts out there that are run by women in the NWSL, and one with, I think that was Angel City's one of their founders, talking about the concern of making sure we keep talent here in the United States. Back when I was younger, we couldn't even dream of that, but I would believe that most of us, if we could have, would have only dreamt of playing in our home country. And now you do have others, because of the way the leagues are structured, that they're structured differently. My own son, Liam Gansner, has talked. He asked a simple question the other day, and he said, "Mom, I don't understand, why is it the NWSL and the MLS?" And I was trying to get at what he was talking about. What he was talking about was over in Europe, many times it's the same team or the same league being driven on the men's and the women's side. And there's a hot debate here about whether you want to do it that way or you don't want to do it that way. But just was a real eye opener from somebody who's young, looking at that, noticing how different we still are from the European game.
Yeah, it is very different, and it will be interesting as the women's game continues to grow. And again, I don't want to be turning a positive into a negative, because certainly, to your point, the broader horizons, the loftier the goals that are available for the young women's players, the better, right? It's reflective of the growth of the game and how profitable it has been in Europe in many cases. So all of that is good, but I do wonder if the NWSL is going to be able to grow fast enough to keep up. Not to say that this would run them out of business, certainly not, but just that the NWSL would go from earlier on, I think, being thought of as good or better than any league in the world, to maybe drifting into more of an MLS territory if they're not careful. And I think in general, and we've talked about this with the women's national team too, all of this is a byproduct of the U.S. as a country playing a huge role in advancing women's soccer globally, and that's an objectively good thing. The unfortunate consequence is that for all that great work that's been done in this country, we are also punished for it to some degree, right? We have more to lose than anybody else because of our stature within the women's game, both in terms of the international competition and in terms of the competition between the domestic leagues. And I think the pressure will be on, especially U.S. soccer, but on the NWSL as well, to try to keep promoting the growth of the women's game globally, but keep up with that growth while it happens.
Agreed. And not only with the professional teams, right? There's 12 in the NWSL, and what are we adding? A couple this next year. So the growth of that, but also the funnel. The funnel is important. So what we lack here, right here in St. Louis, you have St. Louis City, you've got City 2, and you've got City Academy. You do not have that on the women's side. You have club play, whether you are playing in SLISA or on the girls' side, you might have ECNL or the GA, and then you have nothing until college, right? There's a gap there. And so we currently still, as far as I know, we don't have NWSL teams that I believe it's something that they want to do, but we don't have like an academy system. We don't have something that's going to funnel that talent up through. And then, when you have, if you have a City Academy player that's playing for Dale Shilly at some point in time, it's a really good, way to potentially keep them at your club and keep them here in the United States, keep them playing for MLS. We lack that still on the women's side,
which is absolutely the end game. That's the part that it's great for the equity in the game, because as we've talked about on the boys/men's side, the City Academy potentially, because it's not a pay-to-play system, opens the door for a lot of very talented 8, 9, 10-year-olds to get into that system and keep playing at 13, 14, 15, 16 at the highest levels, when otherwise it might have been difficult for their families to afford to keep them playing at that levels.
And that's a big one
with private clubs. But it's not charity. They're not, right? St. Louis City aren't doing it because they think it's the right thing to do. That's part of it. That's why they're investing in it. Right. But they're doing it to try to get talent to their first team.
Mm-hmm. And they pay for it with their profit.
They're looking for Caden Glover, right?
Yeah, for sure.
They're looking for more those kind of the Miguel Perez's of the world. They want those kids, and they want to grow MLS All-Stars locally and claim them early and keep them. It's the same reason that the Liverpools and Manchester Uniteds and Manchester Cities of the world, well, maybe not Manchester City, invest in their academies.
I'm going to tell Alex you said
and try to grow domestically. She'll say it's great to be able to spend $1 billion. Anyway, that's not the point. It's that this entire academy system is built around creating an incentive for the program, for those top level clubs, for those top level teams to invest in their communities, because it ultimately pays off for them.
Right.
And that's something, the pay to play methods, no matter how much they try to balance the equities, they'll never be able to do it, because as great, as much opportunity as St. Louis Scott Gallagher or Lou Hughes or whomever else have provided for young players in this area, after they produce them, when they leave at 17, 18 to go play Division I or to go play professional or whatever, that's it. That's the end. Gallagher has gotten all out of them. Lou Hughes has gotten all out of them what they're going to get. They don't get to see that return on investment like City do when a player makes the first team.
Right. Tom Timmerman actually talked a little bit about statistics in the last hour, and here's another one. When you measure anything, you're going to have true positives and true negatives, meaning the people who should get through, and the people who don't. And then you're going to have false positives and false negatives. And when you have a pay-to-play model, you're going to have potentially more false positives, meaning people that had enough money, that their players are, good enough, but they're of the best. You're going to miss those false negatives, the people who couldn't afford it, but the kid who is outside playing all the time and practically walks around like there's a ball attached to his or her foot at all time. You're going to miss those because they cannot afford to play.
And the worst part about the false negatives, you'll never know who they are.
That's right.
You'll never
There'll
know
be
who
no
they
coverage.
Are.
You don't know where they are.
How good they could have been. Many of them probably stopped playing soccer outright.
Right.
There are players in this country, I guarantee you, well, they're not players anymore. There are adult men and women, but we think about it, I think, more on the men's side because it's where it's put our national team behind. There are men in this country walking around who don't even know themselves that they could have been MLS All-Stars or better. They could have been national team starters. They could have been elite international players, and they stopped playing soccer when they were 12.
Yeah, exactly. And City Academy and City Future, I should say the City Futures program is trying to address things like that. But again, the gap is on the women's side for sure.
We don't know exactly what's in store for this show during the course of the offseason. I'm sure there will be some updates, so stay tuned on social media for that, and we will be with you talking about whatever happens for City in the offseason and looking ahead to next year, which will be here before we know it. Thanks so much for being with us all season long. We appreciate our guests today. We appreciate Kyle Sixta, as always, who has done a great job, not only with this show, but over on our sister station, Y98, producing all those St. Louis City broadcasts for you as well. Thanks a lot for being with us. For my co-host, Jen C., Nate Gatter saying so long. Talk to you again soon. This has been the St. Louis City Soccer Report on KMOX.
Selecting the right real estate agent to sell your home is the single most important factor when selling